It was 11:30 on a Thursday night. Thanksgiving, actually. The house smelled like roasted turkey and my mother's signature cranberry glaze, the one she spent 3 days perfecting every year, not because she loved cooking, but because it photographed well for the holiday card. I was standing in the kitchen doorway, still wearing the black dress she'd picked out for me that morning. My hands were shaking, not from the cold, from what I just said. I'm dropping out of law school. 5 words. 5 words that landed on the dining room table like a grenade. My father set down his wine glass. The crystal clinked against the mahogany. He didn't look at me. He looked at my mother. My mother looked at the centerpiece. My brother looked at his phone. Then my father spoke. His voice was the voice he used in depositions. Low, measured, surgical. Say that again. I said I'm leaving Columbia Law. I've been accepted into a design incubator in Brooklyn. Sustainable fashion. I've been working on a collection for the past 8 months. They selected me out of 2,000 applicants. It starts in January. The silence was so heavy I could hear the grandfather clock in the hallway. Tick, tick, tick. My father pushed his chair back. He stood up slowly, buttoning his suit jacket out of habit, like he was about to address a courtroom. He walked to the window and stared out at the Boston skyline, his reflection ghosting over the glass. Have you ever had a moment where you told the truth and the room turned to ice? Where the people who are supposed to love you just become strangers in nice clothes? That was my Thanksgiving. Tell me about yours in the comments. I read every single one. You will not, he said to the window, embarrass this family with some sewing hobby. It's not sewing, Dad. It's... He spun around. His face was a color I'd never seen. Not red, something darker. You are a Chen. Your grandfather built this firm from a one-room office in Chinatown with nothing. Nothing. I took it to the top. Your brother passed the bar on his first attempt. And you want to play with fabric? My brother, Kevin, finally looked up from his phone. He was 31, a junior partner at my father's firm, Chen and Associates, the most prestigious immigration law practice in New England. Kevin didn't say a word. He never did. His silence was his vote, and it always went to my father. My mother, Diane, reached for her wine. She took a long sip, then set the glass down and smoothed the tablecloth. Her tell. She always smoothed fabric when she was about to deliver the killing blow. Maya, sweetheart. She smiled. The smile that meant the opposite of warmth. You're 26. You have 1 semester left. 1 semester. Can't this little fashion thing wait? This little fashion thing. That was my collection. 8 months of late nights. 63 original pieces made entirely from deadstock fabric and post-consumer textile waste. A full sustainable supply chain I'd mapped from scratch. Patterns I'd drafted on my kitchen floor because my apartment was too small for a table. This little fashion thing was the first time in my life I'd felt like I was breathing. It can't wait, I said. And I'm not asking permission. I'm telling you. My father crossed the room in 3 steps. He stood so close I could smell his cologne, the same Tom Ford he'd worn my entire life. The scent of authority. Then you're telling me goodbye. He said it plainly, like reading a clause in a contract. You walk out that door, Maya, you're done. No tuition, no trust fund, no family. You are out. Do you understand? Out. I understood perfectly. I'd understood my whole life. I just hadn't admitted it until that moment. The Chen household wasn't a family. It was a firm, and I'd just been terminated. Let me tell you about the Chens. My grandfather, David Chen, arrived in Boston from Fujian province in 1971 with $40 and a suitcase held together with twine. He taught himself English by watching courtroom dramas on a black and white television. He got his GED, then his bachelor's, then his law degree, all while working night shifts at a garment factory in Chinatown. The irony of that, me returning to fabric, to textiles, was lost on everyone in my family except me. My grandfather built Chen and Associates into a powerhouse. He helped thousands of immigrants navigate the system. He was beloved. He was also, from what I've been told, kind. But he died when I was 4, and whatever kindness lived in that firm died with him. My father, Robert Chen, inherited the practice and turned it into something else entirely. Bigger? Yes. More profitable? Absolutely. But the mission shifted. My grandfather served the community. My father served the wealthy, foreign investors, corporate visa clients, tech executives needing H-1B transfers. The fees tripled. The soul vanished. At home, the same transactional logic applied. Everything was an investment. My mother's charity work wasn't generosity. It was networking. Kevin's career wasn't his own. It was succession planning. And my education? My Columbia acceptance? My law review aspirations? All of it was a line item in the Chen family business plan. I remember being 12 years old, sitting at this same dining table, showing my mother a skirt I'd sewn from old curtains. I'd taught myself from YouTube videos. The stitching was crooked. The hem was uneven. I thought it was beautiful. My mother held it up, turned it over once, and said, "That's cute, Maya. But the Henderson's daughter just won the regional spelling bee. Maybe you should focus on something that goes on a resume." I never showed her anything I made again. Growing up, I was the footnote. Kevin was the headline. Kevin made Dean's List. Kevin got the internship. Kevin passed the bar. Every family dinner was a performance review, and Kevin always got the promotion. I got the feedback. "Your grades are fine, Maya," my father would say, "but fine doesn't make partner. Fine doesn't build legacy. Fine is forgettable." So I became invisible. I learned to be quiet at the table, to nod at the right moments, to wear what my mother picked, to study what my father chose. On the surface, I was Maya Chen, Columbia Law, second year, top 15%. Underneath, I was suffocating. The night I left, I didn't cry. I didn't slam the door. I just walked upstairs to my childhood bedroom, packed one suitcase, and carried it down the stairs. My mother was clearing the Thanksgiving dishes. My father had gone to his study. Kevin was on a call. Nobody said goodbye. I stepped out into the November cold, and the Boston air hit my lungs like a slap. I stood on the front steps of the brownstone on Beacon Hill, the house my father bought for $2.6 million when I was 9, the house with the iron gate and the perfectly maintained boxwood hedge, and I breathed. For the first time in 26 years, there was no script, no expectation, just cold air and the sound of my own heartbeat. I took the red line to my apartment in Cambridge. The next morning, I withdrew from Columbia. Here's what nobody tells you about freedom. The first month is terrifying. I had $11,000 in savings, a suitcase of clothes, and a January start date for a design incubator that didn't pay a salary. I needed to survive 2 months on nothing. I got a job at a fabric store in Somerville. The pay was $12 an hour. I folded bolts of cotton and organized buttons by color, and I tried not to think about the fact that 6 months ago, I was analyzing Supreme Court precedents in a seminar room that cost more per square foot than my entire apartment. I moved into a one-bedroom above a laundromat in Bushwick the week after Christmas. The radiator clanked all night. The bathroom ceiling leaked. The kitchen was so small I could touch both walls if I stretched my arms. It was mine. And every night after my shift at the fabric store, I worked. I cut, I draped, I stitched. I unpicked and restitched. I turned dead stock denim into structured blazers. I transformed discarded silk samples into flowing, asymmetric dresses. I built a collection that lived in the space between waste and beauty, between what the world threw away and what I could make it become. The incubator started in January. It was 12 designers in a converted warehouse in Gowanus. We shared sewing machines and industrial irons and ate bodega sandwiches for lunch. The program director was a woman named Grace Oyewole. She was 58, Nigerian-born. Had worked in fashion in Paris, Milan, and New York for 3 decades. She'd dressed 2 first ladies in a Beyoncé tour. She was terrifying and brilliant. The first time she looked at my work, she held up a jacket I'd made from upcycled military surplus canvas. She turned it over. She examined the lining. She checked every seam. Then she looked at me with eyes that saw more than fabric. "You built this pattern from scratch?" "Yes." "The dart placement? The shoulder construction? This isn't incubator level. This is ready?" I didn't know what to say. Nobody had ever told me my work was ready. Grace became my mentor. She didn't just teach me construction and draping. She taught me what my family never did, that excellence doesn't have to be extractive, that you can build something demanding and precise and still do it with generosity. She pushed me harder than my father ever had. But the difference was, she pushed me toward myself, not away from it. 6 months in, I had a full collection, 32 pieces. Every single one made from reclaimed materials. Grace arranged a small showcase at the warehouse. I expected maybe 40 people, some friends, some fellow designers, maybe a blogger or two. 170 people showed up. And one of them was a buyer from Nordstrom. Her name was Rachel, and she was calm and direct. And she walked through every piece with a focused silence that made me nervous. At the end, she handed me a card. "Call me Monday," she said. "We should talk about this." That Monday call turned into a meeting. That meeting turned into a purchase order. Nordstrom wanted an exclusive capsule collection, 12 pieces. They wanted it for fall. I cried in the bathroom of the coffee shop where I'd taken the call. Not because of the money, because someone saw it. Someone saw what I'd poured every broken, invisible, unspoken year of my life into, and they said, "This is real." The capsule launched in September. It sold out in 11 days. What happened next went fast. A profile in Vogue Sustainability, a feature in The Cut, an invitation to show at New York Fashion Week, emerging designer category. Every piece in that show was made from waste, from things other people had discarded. The symbolism was not lost on me. After the show, 3 venture capital firms reached out. A sustainable fashion fund based in Copenhagen offered to acquire my brand. We negotiated for 4 months. The final number was $32 million. I sat on the floor of my Bushwick apartment, my back against the radiator that still clanked, and stared at my phone screen. $32 million. After capital gains taxes and legal fees, I netted just under $21 million. I called Grace. "I don't know what to do," I said. "Yes, you do," she said. "You've always known. You just never had permission." I left New York. I'd loved Brooklyn, but it was the city of my becoming, not my being. I needed space. I needed air. I needed to see the sky. I found it in Sedona, Arizona. The red rocks, the silence, the light that changes every hour, rose to gold, to copper, to violet. I found a property on a mesa, an architectural modern adobe with walls of rammed earth and a glass atrium that framed the entire canyon. Clean lines, warm materials. It felt like the opposite of Beacon Hill. It felt alive. I paid $17 million for it, cash. After closing, I still had almost $4 million in liquid assets, plus the ongoing royalty structure from the acquisition, which generated roughly $600,000 per year. For the first time, the math made sense. The house was an investment in my work, my life, and my peace, not a reckless splurge. The centerpiece of the property was the studio, a freestanding structure connected to the main house by a covered breezeway, with 12-foot ceilings and a north-facing wall of glass that flooded the space with even, shadowless light. The kind of light that shows you exactly what you've made. No flattery, no hiding. The first week, I didn't design. I just sat. I sat in that studio and felt the silence and waited for the old voices to come. "Your grades are fine, Maya. Fine is forgettable. This little fashion thing. You are out." I waited for the guilt, for the imposter syndrome, for the voice that said I didn't deserve any of it. It came, but quieter than I expected, and it passed. I got to work. I began designing the next collection, a line built entirely around the concept of repair. Visible mending, Japanese boro techniques applied to modern silhouettes, clothes that wore their history on their sleeves, literally, garments that said, "I was broken, and I'm more beautiful for it." 3 months after I moved to Sedona, a profile ran in the New York Times style section. The headline was something about the fashion world's newest recluse. It was a generous piece. They photographed the house, the studio, the canyon. They mentioned the acquisition price. They mentioned my background, the Chen family, the law school exit, the Thanksgiving that changed everything. The article went live on a Sunday. By Monday evening, I had a voicemail from a number I hadn't seen in almost 2 years. "Hey, Maya, it's Kevin." His voice was different. Not the smooth, practiced Kevin voice. Something thinner, something that almost sounded like humility. But I knew better. "Listen, I saw the Times piece. Incredible. Really. Mom and Dad saw it too. We've all been talking and, look, I know things ended badly. We all feel terrible about how Thanksgiving went. Dad especially. He's been, reflecting. Reflecting. My father had never reflected on anything in his life. He strategized. He calculated. He billed by the hour," Kevin continued. "We were thinking, if you're open to it, we could come out, see the new place, maybe over a long weekend, just to reconnect. It's been too long, Maya." Reconnect. The word was so clean, so innocent, so perfectly engineered. I didn't call him back that night. I sat on the patio, watching the sun set over the canyon, the rocks turning that deep burnt red they do right before dark. I thought about calling Grace, but I didn't need to. I already knew what this was. I called Kevin the next morning. "Fine," I said. "Come this weekend." There was a pause. You could almost hear the surprise. "Really? That's great, Maya. That's really great. We'll fly into Phoenix Saturday morning. I'll send the address," I said. And I hung up. They arrived Saturday afternoon. A white rental SUV pulling up the gravel drive, kicking red dust into the clear desert air. I watched from the kitchen window as they stepped out. My mother first, in cream linen and gold jewelry, shielding her eyes from the sun like it was a personal inconvenience. Kevin next, in khakis and a button-down, looking around at the landscape like he'd landed on Mars. And finally, my father, Robert Chen. He looked older. His hair had grayed at the temples. He straightened his blazer and squared his shoulders, the way he did before walking into a courtroom. They looked like Boston dropped into the desert, stiff and pale and out of place. I opened the front door. My mother walked in and her eyes went wide. The entry opened into a double-height great room, rammed earth walls on one side, floor-to-ceiling glass on the other, the canyon stretching out below in layers of red and orange. "Oh my," she breathed. "Maya, this is—" She searched for a word that wouldn't concede too much. "Spacious." "Thank you," I said. My father said nothing. He walked to the glass wall and stared out, hands in his pockets. He was measuring, appraising. I could see him running numbers in his head, calculating what 17 million bought in Arizona versus what it bought in Boston. I gave them the tour. I kept my voice neutral, pleasant, distant. I showed them the main house, the kitchen, the library, the meditation garden. I showed them the studio last. Kevin stopped in front of a half-finished piece, a deconstructed coat mounted on a wire form, patches of indigo denim and raw silk layered with visible gold stitching. "You made this?" he asked. "I make all of it." My father walked the perimeter of the studio, his hands still in his pockets, not touching anything. "The way you walk through a museum?" He stopped at the far wall, where my New York Fashion Week invitation was framed beside a photograph of Grace and me backstage. "Impressive setup," he said, but his jaw was tight. The word impressive in his mouth always meant, I'm calculating how this affects me. We had lunch in the courtyard. A local chef had prepared green chile stew, fresh tortillas, a bright citrus salad. The food was perfect. The conversation was archaeology. My mother dug carefully around the edges, never touching anything real. "The light out here is extraordinary," she said. "It is," I agreed. Kevin complimented the salsa 3 times. My father ate in silence, his napkin folded precisely on his lap, his water glass untouched. I let the silence stretch. I let them sit in it. They had flown 2,000 miles for something, and they would have to say it themselves. Finally, my father put down his fork. He cleared his throat. "Maya," he began, and I watched his face cycle through expressions, none of them natural. "We didn't just come here to see the house." "I know," I said. The table went still. My father looked at Kevin. Kevin looked at his plate. My mother twisted the clasp of her bracelet. Kevin cleared his throat. "So, here's the situation. The firm is in trouble. A major client, a real estate development group we'd been handling visa processing for, turned out to be running a fraudulent investment scheme. They're being investigated by the SEC, and because we handled their corporate immigration filings, we've been pulled into the investigation. We're not liable, but the legal defense costs are enormous. The firm's insurance doesn't cover this type of exposure." He paused. "We're looking at roughly $3.5 million in legal fees over the next 18 months, and the firm's cash reserves are already stretched because Dad expanded the New York office last year." I looked at my father. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the canyon, his jaw clenched, the muscles in his neck tight. "We're not asking for a handout," Kevin said quickly. "This would be structured as a loan. Formal terms, interest." My mother leaned forward, her voice bright in that artificial way I knew so well. "It's really an investment, Maya. In the family legacy. Your grandfather built that firm. It's our name." There it was. The word. Legacy. The Chen family trump card. The one that was supposed to make me forget everything. I set my glass down. "Let me understand," I said, keeping my voice even. "Dad's firm is in crisis because of a client he chose to take on. A client that, from what you're describing, he should have vetted more carefully. The New York expansion that drained the reserves was Dad's decision. The insufficient insurance coverage was Dad's decision. Every choice that led to this moment was made by the senior partner of a firm that bills over $8 million a year. And the solution is to fly to Arizona and ask the daughter you kicked out on Thanksgiving to write a $3.5 million check." Nobody spoke. I turned to my father. "Dad, you bill $600 an hour. Kevin bills $400. You have a brownstone on Beacon Hill worth over $3 million. You have retirement accounts, investments, lines of credit. You have every resource available to a successful attorney. Why is your disowned daughter your financial plan?" My father's face drained of color. Not because I was wrong, because I was right, and he had no rebuttal. Kevin started to speak. "Maya, it's not that simple. The liquidity, It is that simple, I said. You're here because the Times article made it convenient. You're here because 32 million is a bigger number than the pride it cost to ask. If I were still making $12 an hour at a fabric store in Somerville, nobody would have called. Nobody called for 2 years. My mother's eyes were wet. Maya, that's not fair. We're your family. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had smoothed tablecloths and rearranged centerpieces through every injustice of my childhood. The woman who smiled through my father's cruelty and called it keeping the peace. When Dad told me I was out, I said quietly, "What did you do?" She blinked. When he said I was done, that I had no family, you were standing right there, clearing the dishes. You didn't say a word. You didn't call me the next day, or the next week, or the next month. I slept on a mattress on the floor of a Bushwick apartment with a leaking ceiling, and you didn't call. That's not family. That's an audience. The silence was total. Even the wind had stopped. I stood up. I'm not going to fund the firm, I said, and I'm not going to pretend this is a reunion. My father finally looked at me. For a moment, for just a fraction of a second, I thought I saw something real in his eyes. Something that might have been regret, but it vanished, replaced by the hard, professional mask he'd worn his entire life. This is what I am going to do, I said. I looked at all three of them. I've been working with Grace, my mentor, and a nonprofit collective in Sedona. We're launching a program called Threadwork. It's a free textile arts workshop for young women in underserved communities. Girls who've been told their passions don't belong on a resume. Girls who are invisible at their own dinner tables. That is where my money is going. That is my legacy. Not the firm. Not the Chen name. Mine. My mother stood up. She opened her mouth, closed it, and sat back down. Kevin stared at his hands. My father buttoned his blazer. A reflex. Armor. The guest rooms are made up, I said. But I think you should head back to Phoenix tonight. My father nodded once. A single, curt nod. The nod he gave opposing counsel when he knew he'd lost. They left within the hour. I didn't walk them to the car. I stood in my studio and listened to the gravel crunch under the tires, the engine fading into the desert silence, until there was nothing left but the wind and the light and the sound of my own breathing. That was 5 months ago. My studio isn't quiet anymore. Grace flies in from New York twice a month. She takes over the guest studio and we work side by side, arguing about dart placements and fabric weights, drinking too much coffee, laughing at things nobody else would find funny. Daniel, the developer who built my brand's e-commerce platform, relocated to Sedona. He lives in the casita on the north end of the property and runs operations from there. On Friday evenings, we cook together. Bad cooking, wonderful cooking. The kind where things burn and nobody cares. And on Saturday mornings, 12 girls between the ages of 14 and 19 file into the Threadwork studio in downtown Sedona. They come from the reservation, from the trailer parks off 89A, from the group homes on the south side. They sit at industrial sewing machines and they learn to cut, to drape, to build something from nothing. They learn that their hands can make things the world has never seen. Last week, a girl named Rosa, 16, showed me a jacket she'd made from old denim and copper wire. The stitching was uneven. The proportions were off. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. This is incredible, I told her. She looked at me like nobody had ever said that to her before, probably because nobody had. I know what that feels like. My name is Maya Chen. My family was a firm, and I was a line item that didn't perform. They invested in obedience and expected returns in prestige, and when I defaulted, they cut their losses. But here's what they didn't understand. The things they threw away, the fabric, the creativity, the daughter who didn't fit the business plan, those are the things that turned out to be worth everything. I'm not building a legacy. I'm building a life. There's a difference, and it took me 26 years and one terrible Thanksgiving to learn it. So, what are you building? And what did they tell you to throw away that might be the most valuable thing you own? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And if you want more stories like this, hit subscribe and turn on the bell. Welcome to Karma's Whirl.